Hello. Sorry I can't be there today, guys. I am homesick with my son. In absence of being there, I'm going to record this lecture for you so that you can at least watch it. And don't worry about answering questions at this point. Try and get the notes down if you run into questions that you aren't able to answer or another student can't help you with. I will be there, obviously, on Monday, and then on Tuesday, when I take the notes with one other group, you can feel free to sit in or ask some questions before we get started. So, again, I'm sorry about not being there and having to give you the lecture in video form, but this is the best we can do, and I actually think it'll go pretty smoothly today. Okay, so let's get started. This section or this unit is on the last bit of ecology that we're going to talk about, which is energy flow. So as we get into this and talk about energy flow, we're just going to look at basic feeding relationships and then how energy moves through an ecosystem. Okay. First thing we're going to talk about are ecosystems and what make up ecosystems. Um, to that point, the things that make up ecosystems are biotic factors and abiotic factors. Biotic factors are living organisms, so that can be, again, anything living, anything with carbon, right? Anything that was at one point living or is living is a biotic factor. Um, a good example of this would be prey that predators are hunting. That affects their population size, and it's a biotic factor. An abiotic factor is going to be something that's not living. That can be anything from temperature to soil to light to moisture, air currents, even water. Okay, and moisture is water, so that points there. Anything that's not living but also has a potential effect on a population can be an abiotic factor, and those affect communities and ultimately ecosystems. So both of these factors go into shaping an ecosystem and what organisms and species can survive in that ecosystem. An ecosystem, to that end, is a community in which biotic and abiotic factors affect it. So you could even write down something like populations that are interacting with their biotic and abiotic factors are part of an ecosystem. Okay, ecosystems can be marine or terrestrial, but usually when we describe an ecosystem, it's very specific. Something like the Great Barrier Reef or the Amazon rainforest. If you just say rainforest, you're starting to talk a little bit about biomes. Ecosystems tend to be more specific, so when you're looking at an ecosystem and relationships within an ecosystem, try and be as specific as possible. Next thing we're going to look at here, which ties into ecosystems, is ecosystem evolution. Ecosystem evolution is succession. So I'll say that one more time. What you should write down here is that when we talk about succession, we're looking at the evolution of ecosystems. I should have said earlier, but feel free to stop this video at any point and just jot down some notes. That way you're not rushing. You do have that ability. So there are two kinds of succession. We have primary succession and secondary. Primary succession happens in areas that are new land. So any type of brand new island or an area of land that may be exposed after a glacier recedes, that's brand new land. And that land has no soil on it. So if an ecosystem is going to evolve onto it or evolve in it, um, that land has to have some soil, and that happens through primary succession. So jot down in primary that it is ecosystem evolution where there is brand new land. With secondary succession, you're looking at this process of a forest growing or an ecosystem evolving on land that is not new but was, decimated. So if a forest fire comes and rips through the ecosystem that you're looking at, then there is still soil there. So a forest and an ecosystem can grow back again, and it's not new land, but there's still, again, open spaces for this to occur. So Secondary succession is going to be the evolution of an ecosystem where there is already soil and the land is not new. So when we look at primary and secondary succession, these steps are going to occur. So what I'd like you to really write down is like number one, what's there? Number two, what's there? And that'll really help you order what the process is when it comes to succession. First step is going to be the presence of lichen, moss, and bacteria right here. That's step one. That is going to help generate soil, take nitrogen out of the air, and fix it into the soil and to the plants that are there. Lichen, moss, and bacteria are usually the first species to show up in an ecosystem that is new or on land that is new. Every other step beyond this happens in primary and secondary succession. This one only happens in primary succession. So then after a forest fire or after the presence of lichen and moss show up, or these plants show up, what you get here is grasses. Grasses are the next step. Third step is going to be shrubs and small plants. And then the fourth step is going to be trees, young trees and ultimately larger, older trees. This shows the evolution of an ecosystem because you're starting out with smaller autotrophic aquatic species and you're building your way up to a forest. This is key, one of the key factors in this is the amount of nitrogen in the soil. As this process goes from left to right, more nitrogen gets fixed in the soil, and that ecosystem's able to support larger and larger and larger organisms. Okay? So succession is that slow process of evolving or an ecosystem evolving or changing over time. And when you get to climax forest, there's really nothing else, nowhere else for that ecosystem to go. Forest is pretty much the top of that process, or the end of that process. Okay, next. We've got feeding relationships. We're going to look at this pretty simply because you've probably heard of these before. Producers make their own food. Those are also called autotrophs, and they use the sun's energy and the atmosphere and resources around them to create energy. Okay, so anything like a plant going through photosynthesis, that's going to be an autotroph and a producer, and those are at the bottom of the food chain. Consumers are called heterotrophs because they don't make their own food, they consume their food, or they ingest food from other organisms, or they might actually be those organisms. And so if they're eating other organisms, those can be anything from herbivores to other carnivores to other organisms, but at some point, the sun's energy was involved, okay? Take an herbivore, for example. If a consumer is going to eat an herbivore, that herbivore got its energy from eating plants, which got its energy from doing photosynthesis using the sun's energy. So all energy stems from the sun, and as consumers eat other organisms, including maybe plants or just other organisms, that process or that the relationship there has to stem from the sun's energy. Okay, there are four kinds of consumers. We'll go through this briefly. Herbivores eat plants. The thing to note here is that they are known as primary consumers. They're like the second level of a food chain. If plants are the first level, herbivores would be the second level. Consumers can be third or fourth or fifth level organisms in a food chain. They eat meat or, other organisms. We're going to skip scavengers for now because we've talked about that last unit. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. They can be in many different levels of a food chain and utilize resources from other levels. So they're kind of all over the place. And decomposers help break down dead and decaying plants. They use those for energy, and then they release those molecules back into the atmosphere and allow plants to utilize them again. So fungus are classified as decomposers, or you could say detrivores, which are the same thing as decomposers. Last thing we're going to look at here are trophic levels, and this is probably the most important thing to note from this section of the unit. Trophic levels represent feeding relationships and the transfer of energy. So within an ecosystem, each link in a food chain is going to represent a trophic level. And knowing that is really important because each trophic level is going to be a different size for a different or for a specific reason. Okay. So let's take a look at some and we'll go back to biomass in a second. Here would be an example of a very, I like this visual of a trophic structure. What you've got here is a producer level that takes up a ton of space. It is the largest level in the ecosystem, followed by the herbivores or the primary consumers, followed by the secondary consumers, followed by the top tier predators or the top tier consumers or the tertiary consumers. What you see here is that there are more plants than there are primary consumers and more herbivores than there are other organisms in the food chain. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, why is that the case? Think about the food you eat, the food you ate for lunch. If you ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, about 50% of that sandwich is being used to generate energy in you so you can listen to this video and take notes. About 40% of that, or maybe a little less, is being lost as waste and heat. And 10% of it is being used to build the biomass that makes up your body. So what you see here is that of all the energy in this level that's being utilized to create this level or being utilized in this level, when the energy is transferred from this one to this one, only 10% of that is being used to build this level. And so what you should expect to see in every ecosystem is less of these than there are of this level, because only 10% of that energy, again, is being used to build the level. When I say build, let me go back a second. Sorry, guys. When I say build, what I'm talking about is biomass. You are made of organic matter, and that organic matter that makes up your skin and your cells, the cells on your skin that make up it, and any cell that makes up your body, those are made of organic material called biomass. So if you wanted to think about like how much biomass you have, it would be what you weigh if there was no water inside of you. That would be your biomass. So where does the biomass come from? It comes from these levels. In any ecosystem, the producers are going to have a ton of biomass, and only 10% of what is utilized by these herbivores is going to be used to build their biomass. And of the energy that's used by these organisms at the top, only 10% of what they take in is going to be used to build them. What this means is that as you go up the food chain, the reason why you see less top predators than you do plants, and why you don't look up into the sky and see a sky full of hawks ready to pounce on you, is because there's just not enough energy to create that many hawks. They're not utilizing all that energy to build hawks. They're utilizing a lot of it to hunt and move around, and they're going to use it for energy. That's where it's going. Okay. So in typical ecosystems, you should see less predators than you do plants because of that 10% rule on energy transfer. Finally, we'll just quickly look at food chains and food webs. A food chain is a simple model that shows feeding relationships and how energy moves through an ecosystem. But like we just looked at, this right here is also a food web, or I'm sorry, a food chain. But it shows you how much energy is being transferred from level to level. I really like this food chain model a lot better than this one because this one doesn't really show you a lot. It just shows you who's eating who. The pyramid shows you how much of each level is being used to make the next level. This would be a simple food chain. Food chains like this can be transferred into the model like a pyramid to show you a little more information. A food web just shows you all possible food chains in a community. So a food web might be something like this. This one on the right is going to show you all the food chain possibilities in that ecosystem. This one's just going to show you one of the relationships. And this food web can also be organized into a pyramid to show you which levels are being transferred to which levels. Here's some other ones, for example. If you want to pause on any of these and look at them more closely, you're welcome to. All right, last bit is on toxins. What we should or what I want to finish with today is how toxins affect food chains. What you see with toxins in an ecosystem is that, oops, let's say we're looking at the food chain that we've been looking at here, this shark one. When it comes to toxins, toxins in the ecosystem are just like pollutants. So if there's pollution in the ecosystem, you can call that a toxin. A toxin is going to be absorbed initially by producers in that ecosystem. As they go through photosynthesis and they take in the atmosphere or the molecules around them, they're going to take in some of the poison and toxin as well. They're all going to collect toxin. So if we pretend these producers collect one molecule of toxin, then the herbivores above that who are eating the plants and eating more plants than just one, right? They're eating plants for energy and to build themselves. As they eat those plants, they're going to be collecting those molecules of toxin. So you could argue, you could hypothesize or envision one of these shrimp eating some of the plant material or krill or whatever this is, eating some of the energy from this producer level, and let's pretend they eat, you know, 10 plants or over their lifetime eat 2, okay, or some other number. What that means is they're going to collect that one molecule of toxin from each plant they eat. So they are going to have more toxin in them than the plants had. When you look at the mackerel level here, who are going to eat these shrimp and krill, every shrimp and krill they eat is going to have, let's hypothetically say, 2 molecules of toxin. So as they eat these shrimp and krill, they're going to collect 2 molecules of toxin for every single one they eat and become even more toxic. And let's say these have 10 molecules of toxin in each one of them. For every mackerel or fish that the shark eats, it's going to collect that amount of toxin, making the shark at the top the most toxic organism in that ecosystem. When humans harvest food out of a food web for energy, or they harvest it for selling in a grocery store, or just eating in general, we have to be very careful that we are not eating the top level predators. This bald eagle's obviously a protected organism already, but even if it wasn't, let's pretend that you were looking at something like a hawk, right? If you had caught a hawk and you were thought and you're thinking about eating it, the reason why you wouldn't want to eat it is because it's at the top of the food chain, and it's going to have toxin in it if it's been exposed to any pollution. Because if that ecosystem has pollution in it and those organisms are collecting the toxin, because it's at the top, it will have collected the most toxin in the food chain, making it dangerous for you to eat. This is called biological magnification. As you move up the food chain, the intensity or the concentration of the poison becomes more and more. I hope you found this helpful. Again, I'm sorry I can't be there. And, if you have questions about this or you prefer to talk to me about any particular slide, um, just come and ask me. Or you can sit in with us on Tuesday when we go over this again. The lab is going to be done on Monday this week or next week because of me not being there today. But again, if you have any questions about this, please just ask, email me, or talk to me in person next week. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this and take the notes down. It'll really help us stay on schedule. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. I will see you when I get back. Bye.